This message has no affiliation with the Department of War. Good evening, everyone. Stick with us today as we go over the results of the 2025 election, Proposition 50, and the way forward. This is a special edition of the Martin Memo. The Martin Memo. So I think we have to start out by acknowledging that last night's results were not what we hoped for, of course. They were a little disappointing as far as some of the differential, which we're going to get into. But are we really surprised? I mean, these were four areas from Proposition 50, the New York City, Virginia, New Jersey. These are four pretty much stronghold areas for Democrats. I think we would perform a little bit better. Yes, of course I did. I thought it would be closer to maybe like the 6-7% instead of 14%, 13%. But I'm overly not that surprised. And I think this is a good wake-up call for Republicans because commonly the theme that we had seen last night was affordability. That was pretty much the number one issue for everyone. Economy, affordability, prices of groceries, prices of energy, different things like that. So I think Vivek Ramaswamy actually hit the nail on the head when he said, we need to start focusing on affordability. I think they're doing great things, but I think we can do a lot better than what we have been seeing. So with that being said, let's move on. I'm going to go through all the races, and then we can kind of talk a little bit about each one. So, starting out with Virginia. Abigail Spanberger won against Winsome Earl Sears, 1.9 million to 1.4 million, 57.2% to 42.6%. As mentioned earlier, that is considered a blowout. That's a plus 14% margin. That is pretty substantial. So now moving on down to the lieutenant governor race within Virginia, and Ghazala Hassami ended up winning that election, 1.8 million to 1.5 million. That's a 55% basically to 44.5% over John Reed. So not quite as big, but that's still pretty substantial. Now we're going to go over to the Virginia Attorney General race, which this one was the most controversial one, and we'll dive into why here in a minute. Jay Jones ended up winning 1.7 million to 1.5 million. That's 52.7% to 56.9%. So it was a lot closer. However, this person openly said that killing Republicans, how he fantasized, how he had a fetish of killing Republicans, and he ended up still winning. After him winning, I do not want to hear anything from the Democratic side of the aisle saying how Republicans need to turn down the heat or there's so much extremism within the Republican Party. If you are openly electing someone who said that they fantasize about killing Republicans, I don't know. I think that's a little bit far-fetched if you ask me. In fact, 41% of people that voted in Virginia yesterday thought that that should have been disqualifying enough right there, those messages that he had sent. 27% said they were concerned about it. So if you add those two numbers up, that's 68%. 68% of people thought that those were at least concerning, with some believing that he should have been disqualified. But yet he still got 52.7% of the vote. That, to me, kills me. Moving on to one of the other exit polls, and that was the gender gap. The gender gap, again, is becoming a huge issue within modern-day politics. 54% of women voted for Abigail Spanberger, compared to 36% for Winsome Earl Sears. And then for men, it was 53% for Winsome Earl Sears, 47% for Abigail Spanberger. So this gender gap is playing yet again into our elections. We're going to go ahead and move down into the New Jersey race. Mikey Sherrill ended up winning. She won 1.8 million compared to 1.4 million. Also 56% to 43%. This was another big loss for Republicans. And just overall, I mean, that's a 13-point gap, again, that we are seeing. And like I mentioned earlier, that gender gap is coming back. 62% of women voted for Mikey Sherrill compared to 38% of women voted for the Republican ticket. And then same for men, 52% of men voted for the Republican side, where 48% voted for the Democrat side within that election. The biggest sweet spot for the Democrat Party as of now is these 30 and younger women. That is who they are just making massive strides with for whatever reason. So that is something that Republicans are going to need to basically figure out how they can gain back the trust of the younger women. We're seeing the men go increasingly towards the right and women going increasingly towards the left. We need to figure out how we can kind of pick up some slack and have the Republican Party be trusted among females again. So moving on to another exit poll that I had found, when voters were voting for Cheryl, they were asked what were their thoughts on the president. 0% said they supported him, who voted for Mikey Cheryl. 27% said that Trump was not a factor in placing their vote. And then a whopping 70% of Cheryl voters said that they voted her to oppose him. Again, those are staggering, huge numbers. Within the Garden State of New Jersey, 35% said taxes were the number one problem. 70% thought taxes were too high within New Jersey. But yet they voted for the candidate who said they did not know the difference between sales tax and other taxes within New Jersey. You can't make this up. For the record, New Jersey does have some of the highest, if not the highest, tax rates within the U.S. Moving on to the New York City mayor election, Mondami got 1 million votes within New York City. Andrew Cuomo got 150,000, and Andrew Silva got 145,000. One thing that I do want to bring up is Silva did not cannibalize these votes like a lot of people are anticipating. Did he take away some votes? I'm sure he did. But even if you gave Silva's votes all to Cuomo, it still would not have been enough. It would have been 50 to 48%. Additionally, you have to assume that all those voters are going over to Cuomo. I guarantee you a lot of those voters probably would not have even voted in the election, so I don't think you can blame Silva necessarily. Do I think he hurt Cuomo? Yes, but overall, Zoran Mondami was about to be the next mayor of New York. There was no stopping that. Some people say that maybe you could have waited 2 weeks and it would have been different results. That's fair. But I think overall, Zoran Mondami was going to win this New York City race. Some more exit polls. 56% said affordability influenced their decision on this election. When asked, do you consider yourself a Democrat socialist like Zoran Mondami? 25% said yes. 70% said no. More people were willing to break their typical political ideology and support Zoran Mondami. New York, that's scary. Here's another interesting one. 67% of people said it was a factor whether their candidate supported Israel or not. 67% of people thought that that was a factor. When questioned, what do you believe the state of New York's economy is in, 33% said it was good. 64% thought that it was bad or headed in the wrong direction. Of those people, 34% believed that raising taxes was the right answer, compared to 60% who thought that would hurt even more. 71% of people thought crime was a major problem within New York City, but yet they elected someone who opposes the NYPD, who said that they would defund the NYPD. Make that make sense. And lastly, 44% of people thought Mondami's policies were realistic, while Andrew Cuomo got 58%. More people thought that his policies were more realistic than Zoran Mondami's, yet they still broke Mondami's way. Wake up, New York. And lastly, I saved the best for last, and that is Proposition 50. For those of you who do not know what Proposition 50 is, it is legislation that has been passed to redistrict California and essentially get rid of 5 Republican congressmen. Now, they say this is in response to the Texas redistricting plan, and it's only supposed to be temporary. It's only supposed to stick around for 3 election cycles. But let me ask you something. If you are in a Democrat state, which this state's going to be Democratic for a very long time, why would you want to give the power up? If you had 5 free congressional seats, all with a D next to them, why would you just say, hey, you know what? We only said 3 election cycles. Now we're going to give it back. Now we're going to go back to the old redistricting. You're not going to do that. Why they say it may be temporary for now, this is sticking around for the long haul. They ended up passing this 5.1 million to 3 million. So basically 64% to 36%. Very steep numbers again. This ballot measure was the 7th most expensive ballot measure in U.S. history, with $140 million spent on this measure alone. $98 million was for the redistricting efforts. $42 million was against the redistricting efforts. They outspent 2-1. Now, you may say this is a win for Democrats, but is it really? I mean, sure, it basically cancels out the 5 seats in Texas, but the ramifications in the long run are going to be historic, and it's going to go deeper than just what occurred. So first off, in California, 25% of individuals are registered as Republican. Now, this number is more like 36% historically, looking at presidential election, governor election, different things like that. But still, that's a decent chunk of the population within California who are registered as Republican. Now, because of this ballot measure, it's going to take the congressional seats that the Republicans hold, which they hold 9 out of 52, it's going to drop it down to 4 out of 52. That's accounting for 13% of the seats are going to be owned by Republican, even though 25% of the state is registered Republican. And like I said, it's more like 36%. Now, the second ramification that it's going to have is now other states are more likely to redistrict. In fact, some states are already in the process of it. It's not just the Texas one that you keep hearing about. Currently, North Carolina is supposed to add another Republican seat. So is Missouri. That's another +1. Ohio, that's at 2. And because of this ballot measure, now Florida and Indiana are opening their eyes, and they're about to do the same thing. If Florida ends up doing this, that's a +4 potential swing towards the Republican side. And Indiana's another one. That would be a +3 potential pickup for the Republicans. If you do all that math together, take out Texas and California, that would be a +11 gain for the Republican side. Now, before I give my thoughts on gerrymandering, I think the irony within Proposition 50 were these 2 exit polls that were published. 51% of people said they voted yes on the ballot measure because they wanted to oppose Trump. Makes sense. It's California. However, 92% of those individuals also believed that it should be done by an independent commission. So you're opposing Trump. You're doing this because you do not like Trump, but you want someone independent to come in and take care of it? I think that's a little bit far-fetched, if you ask me. Now, lastly, on Proposition 50, this is going to have more ramifications than just those states that I had listed off. This is going to be a whole gerrymandering party across the entire nation. Mark my words. Within the next few years, you're going to see so many states that end up adopting a Proposition 50. We're already starting to see that occur now. Now, I do not like gerrymandering. I'm not for it at all. However, if one side's going to do it, then I'd imagine the other side's going to do it. So that's why I'm not necessarily upset that the Republicans are fighting back and they're actually doing it themselves. I think that's kind of been long overdue. Probably should have done it a while ago, but at least they are taking advantage of it now, and hopefully it works out in the long run. I could do an entire episode on gerrymandering, which I intend to do, but now is not the time. I will use that on another podcast, I promise you all. So my overall thoughts, again, I believe that this was not necessarily a loss for Republicans. I think we all expected this, maybe not as high as it was, but I think we all knew that it was going to head in this direction. Before people start blaming and saying it's a referendum on Trump or all these things, I don't think so. I think there were many key components that led to a bigger blowout than what was anticipated. But Republicans can take away some things from that blowout yesterday. Never get too comfortable. That's a good one for starters. Focus more on the affordability. That seems to be across the board. People care more about affordability than anything. And they need to start thinking about life after Trump, because come the next presidential election, he will not be on the ballot. So they need to start thinking about their ground game, their social media game, everything, or else they might have another loss like what occurred last night. With that all being said, well, folks, that's all we have in store for today. Join us on Friday as we go over the second part of the LGBTQ community. Share your thoughts on X, follow us on Instagram and Facebook at the Martin Memo, and don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. Now, in case I don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, and good night. This is the Martin Memo. The Martin Memo.